Hello everyone, we hope that you enjoyed the first of our categories, which was content, and now we hope that you are ready for the second of our categories, which is communication. In this sense, our journey must go on, and our adventure is ready to carry on. So, before getting really into our communication category, we really need to take into account this principle that Cleo is suggesting. Learning and using are considered to be concepts that are closely related to each other, because students learn in order to use, but they also use in order to learn. What does that mean? Okay, the first one is suggesting that students in our schools really need to learn how to use something, whether it's knowledge, whether it's content, whether it's a number of abilities. All in all, our students are always learning how to use or how to get into practice knowledge and not language skills in our case. The second one suggests that students use in order to learn, because students need to be given multiple opportunities for them to get all of the theory into real practice. And in this sense, using becomes just an excuse in order to practice and in order to develop skills and developing understanding. So we really need to use whatever we know and whatever we can do so that we can actually learn. Let's get more into detail with this. Students use content in order to learn language, but they also use language in order to learn content. They also learn content to use language, and they learn language to use content. Do not worry, it may sound a little confusing, or actually very confusing, but if we sit down and carefully think them through, we are going to see that one of them suggests a different meaning. We use content to learn language, so we use different topics in order to learn vocabulary and to develop linguistic skills in order to be able to talk about them. Okay, next one. We use language to learn content. So we really need to develop certain linguistic skills in order to be able to talk about different topics and to develop understanding about them. If we stop for a minute and we carefully think, we are going to see that cognition or thoughts are closely related to language, because language is our way, our human way to deconstruct reality and to abstract whatever is happening around us in order for us to be able to understand what is actually going on. So now that we stopped this little minute, let's continue. We learn content to use language. So this means that we are developing understanding of a number of topics in order to have an excuse for us to practice our linguistic skills. And same here, we learn language to use content. So we are learning certain vocabulary, we are developing certain linguistic skills, we are developing certain communicative functions in order to be able to handle knowledge, in order to be able to handle content itself. So if you have a minute to sit down with one of your colleagues and talk to them about this and carefully think this through in order to find differences in meaning, that would be actually very valuable, because they may seem a little too close, but they are actually suggesting different meanings. Okay, and now that we are here, we really need to say that this category, communication, is all about language. Before, in the first category that we covered, content, we said that that category, content, didn't have anything to do with language, because we already had a category for that, and it's this one, the one that we are covering right now. Communication is all about language, and it's all about analyzing and deconstructing language learning, which is what we are going to do now into detail. Our big goal as language teachers is to build progression in classroom interaction and also in language use. So that means that in our English lessons from now on, we are going to have a high level of interaction and also a high level of language real practice. As we said before, communication is the only category out of the 4 C's that has 3 subcategories. These are 3 points of view that make up the whole language learning process. So all of them are very important. They may have similar names, but they are indeed very different from each other. So here we are going to spend a little more time, and we are going to need a little more attention. So they are called language of learning, language for learning, and language through learning. So as we are seeing here, the preposition is the one that makes the difference. So in a glimpse, let's see what they are about. Language of learning is all about grammar, and it's all about lexis. So that means that in this little subcategory we are going to place everything related to tenses of the language, structures of the language, and also vocabulary. Language for learning, the second one, the one in blue. Here we are placing all of the actions that students carry out by using language. Here we need to ask ourselves, what are those communicative functions that students achieve by speaking in English or by writing in English? That means by communicating in English. So here we are going to place all of those actions that they carry out by communicating. So in order to identify them, we are going to see that these actions are introduced by a communicative verb. And do not worry, we are going to go a little more into detail later on. Language through learning. Here we are going to place activities in which students are learning something more than language. Usually in our English learning process, we are learning how to handle technological devices, we are learning how to create big posters, we are learning artistic skills, hand skills. I mean, we develop not only communicative skills, but we develop a wide range of diverse skills as well. And this is what language through learning is about. Activities that teach something more than English itself, than grammar, than lexis, than the mere communicative dimension of language. And here we also include the learn how to activities. This means the activities in which students are learning how to create, how to follow a specific process in order to achieve a concrete result. And usually these activities have a sequence, and this sequence is made up of pre, while, and post. So these are the 3 subcategories in a glimpse. Now we're going to go deeper into them, okay? Okay, so language of learning is about the language that students need to access knowledge. Students need vocabulary, students need grammar, tenses, students need grammatical structures. So what is that? What are those little pieces of language that students need to have in order to be able to build progression in language use, in language practice, but also in content understanding? Because as we saw before, we linked language learning to content learning. So here we really need to be clear on something. Language of learning is the only subcategory that is purely grammatical, because as we are going to see later on, the other subcategories go beyond the language. So this is the only one that is purely linguistic or purely grammatical, so to say. You might be wondering, hey, what are examples of those? Okay, so in language of learning, we can include WH questions, adverbs, whether they are of frequency, time, modal verbs, present simple, so all tenses, past simple, progressive, perfect, all tenses go here, prepositions, vocabulary related to any contents, like vocabulary related to animals, to days of the week, vocabulary related to different semantic fields. Here we can also include expressions or grammatical structures like used to, have to, auxiliary verbs, rather, singular and plural nouns, conjunctions, the alphabet. So as we see here, they are all purely grammatical, and here we have a very wide range of possibilities because language is made up of really a high number of pieces. So possibilities here are almost endless. Okay, it's time to move on to the next subcategory, and this one is language for learning. Here we are going to identify the language that students are going to need in order to be able to operate in a foreign language environment. Let's imagine ourselves in a country in which nobody speaks Spanish or our original mother tongue. In this case, we are going to need to meet our communicative needs, right? And in order to identify those communicative needs, those communicative functions that we achieve through language, we need to ask ourselves the following questions, because they are going to give us the answers. What do I do with language? What are those actions that I can carry out by communicating, by speaking in English or by writing in English? How do I operate with language? How do I successfully get through a communicative situation in a foreign language environment? How do I get through in a second language environment? What communicative functions do I achieve? And last but not least, what communicative needs do I have to meet? So it is evident that human beings have communicative needs, and in this sense we need a range of communicative skills, we need language to be able to do that, and here right from the syllabus we are explicitly considering them so that the language learning process is actually complete. So examples of language for learning are talking about, saying, expressing, discussing, describing, reading about, writing about, listening to. So have you found sort of a pattern so far? What do they have in common? Let's continue and then you can say what you found that they had in common. Giving advice, regretting, complaining, giving orientations, introducing, ordering, agreeing and disagreeing. Okay, so what they had in common is that all of them have, or all of them are introduced by a communicative verb. If you see, the verb already implies a communicative dimension of the word, and if students are giving advice, if they are regretting, complaining, ordering, agreeing or disagreeing, it explicitly implies language. So here in language for learning, we identify the communicative functions that students achieve or that students need to achieve in order to be competent in a foreign language. And we consider them explicitly right from the syllabus. If you want to share your answers from these questions, which is not mandatory, you can feel free to do so, and you can share your ideas in the discussion forum. That would be actually very interesting, and you can get in touch with your colleagues to see if your answers are similar, if they are different, and how you can enrich them right from each other answers. Okay, and now let's go through the last subcategory of communication. This one is language through learning. And beyond language through learning lies the principle, supported by Cleo, that effective learning takes place when there is active implication between language and knowledge. Here we teach students tips and we teach students strategies, but we also help them to develop strategies by themselves. This means that we facilitate conditions so that they come up with their own strategies, or so that they explore them and they discover them by themselves. Here we really need to say that structures and functions are not enough. So language through learning is about, just like we said before, those activities in which language is not the main focus, it's not the main point. They are learning how to do something else in English, but they are not learning English itself. So here, in this category, students develop and students learn about tips and strategies to learn better and to communicate better. Examples of this: making a big book, making a poster, making plant cards. Are they learning English here? Yes, in an implicit way. They are not learning English explicitly, like grammar or communicative functions, but they are learning how to create something else in English. This is the reason why it is through, and this is the reason why the preposition chosen here is through. Some other examples are interpreting maps and graphics, reading and listening strategies, how to write an email, analyzing survey data, creating a journal, studying skills, mnemonics, and using notes. So as we see here, language through learning, and if you ask us how, the way we would sum up this subcategory in a few words, we would say language through learning is about tips and strategies to learn better and to communicate better, and also activities in which language or English is not the main point, but it's there. Language is implicit, not explicit, and the main goal is related to anything else, developing skills of some other kind. They can be motor skills, artistic skills, or skills related to language itself. So everything related to metacognition is going to go here as well. Okay, this is the end of the category. This is all about communication. It was a little full of ideas because we had 3 subcategories to go through. But now, let's get some minutes in order to wrap up this whole week. So this week was about content and communication, and in order to wrap them up, we are going to do a thinking routine. Please, in the discussion forum, share what you used to think about CLIL, content and communication, and what you think now. What ideas have changed? How has your vision of language education or language teaching changed in this week? So please share what you used to think and what you think now. Any changes, any ideas? We are very, very excited to see what you think, and please, it would be very, very valuable if you get the chance to reply to what your colleagues have commented in the discussion forum. This was everything. We hope it was a week with plenty of ideas, with plenty of inspirational moments, and get ready for next week because the adventure and the journey is going to carry on. See you next week.